it'll just be audio only, and I'll probably share it on like Friday. Or it'll drop live on Friday. Is the current plan. So
sounds good.
All right, go ahead and get into the intro. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 41 of the Snake in the Draft podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Vines. You can find me on Twitter at jsnake_DFF. In this episode, I have Luke Sawhook come on the podcast. You can find Luke running the Dynasty Nerds main account and a writer for Renegade Blitz. We're going to be talking about Dynasty trades for days. Welcome, Luke. How are you? And also, did I pronounce your last name correct, Sawhook?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is, actually. Yeah, it's a saw and a hook. People always get scared, but it's really easy. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun.
I agree. And I've been talking about recently on the podcast about with Dynasty, setting up your teams for the future, looking at like teams that have trade deadlines coming up. And so I think trade discussion is perfect for right now. So is there a certain way that you personally look at how to find players you want to trade for? Or does it more relate to how other teams are doing? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, I usually don't really look too much at people's records. I usually just go off a gut feeling of what I believe in the player long term, especially for Dynasty. I mean, I have my core group of guys that I love, the Antonio Gibsons of the world, but I usually just try to look at my team where I have holes, and I look at other people's teams where they have holes, and I kind of just try to find something that's a bridge that is a value for both sides and try to get a deal going. I also am a big believer in neither being like a mid-ground team. You either want to be a contender or completely like punt and rebuild for draft picks. So I feel like a lot of people don't do that. So I feel like I really like trying to target people who are going to rebuild and be like, hey, it's a good idea to punt your team for this year. Here's a draft pick for X player. So I do that a lot as well.
Yeah, I've mentioned that multiple times on this podcast because that middle team, like if you're sort of fighting for that last playoff spot, but then you look at, like we were talking before, Luke, you're in a league where that's you and two other teams as the big dogs. And if you're fighting for that sixth playoff spot, why are you doing that if you're looking at the big dogs and you're like, I may be able to get lucky and beat one of them, but what are the odds I can beat all of them? Very slim.
Exactly.
So that's, you should just go, destroy it a little bit, get ready for 2021. I'm not saying like go in a 3-year rebuild unless like you think you need to, but yeah, a lot of people, you're right, don't think about
keep your
trying to stay on top of it.
Yeah, just keep your youngins and get rid of the old guys and get some draft picks.
Yeah, like one trade I've been trying to do in a couple leagues that no one wants to do right now, but trying to get Marvin Jones away for a early 2021 third right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. Marvin Jones is tough right now.
Yes.
Him and I talked about a trade I did for Phillip Rivers earlier that we'll come back to later, but Phillip Rivers feels pretty much impossible to trade right now in dynasty leagues for picks. No one wants him.
Yeah, it's tough, and then like part of you like always wants that quarterback coming back your way too, especially we're talking about super flex leagues right now, and that does get tough because you're like, what, I send Phillip Rivers in a first, and who would I get right now? Like Teddy Bridgewater, like it's just like
maybe like it's tough to move Phillip Rivers because everyone needs their quarterbacks, but no one really wants to give up a ton for old ones, which is really weird.
Yeah, and he actually produced decent a couple weeks ago. I don't know how his last week was, but
yeah,
a lot of people were really crapping on him because of his lack of production. But he's been sort of turned around. And speaking of Superflex, is there a certain way that you like to construct your teams? And I only play Superflex leagues. I don't play one QB, and I think it's just more enjoyable for me because then you have more players that you can trade for, a little bit more different type of strategy that I enjoy. So I always like to hear different people's thoughts on how they value certain players and positions.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Superflex is definitely superior in dynasty formats. I feel like valuing the quarterback position realistically to real life is definitely relevant, and I think that's a good way to play dynasty fantasy football. But the way I like to build my teams is I like to have a stud at each position. So I like to have a stud quarterback, at least one stud running back, stud wide receiver, and at least a top 5 tight ends. I like to try to target Kittles, Kelsey's. I believe in a lot of Darren Waller still long term, so I'm a big Darren Waller guy in Dynasty. But yeah, I love going out to try to trade for people. Like this offseason, I was targeting every Mahomes and Kyler Murray share I could get my hands on because I feel like it's just such a big weekly advantage to have a quarterback that's almost a lock to get 25 plus points every week. So especially in 6-point passing touchdown leagues, like Kyler and Mahomes this year has been insane. Like in one of the leagues, I had a startup draft last offseason, Superflex, and I traded up in the first round. I already drafted Mahomes and traded up to get Kyler. And the Mahomes-Kyler duo in Superflex has been absolutely insane. It's been so fun. So I definitely like getting the really stud quarterbacks and then building my team around certain foundational players and then going from there.
Yeah, I like that, Colin. I know a lot of people in Superflex, they tend to look at quarterbacks and say, hey, let's actually wait on the quarterbacks because they're going to all score around the same points, which that's not necessarily incorrect. There is, like you mentioned, if you have the Kyler Murrays and the Patrick Mahomes, you do have that like 5-10 point advantage. Like right now, looking at Kyler Murray, 29 points per game. And then the QB 12 right now is Lamar Jackson at 19.9. So that's about 10-point difference.
It's huge.
And then
Yeah.
it is really huge. I would say like in one QBs, it's not as necessary, even though there is a league that is a redraft where I have Mahomes, and he's definitely helped me go on a 4-game win streak recently to get me into some playoff contention. But one point I wanted to get to as well is we're talking about quarterbacks, and I think this year a lot of people have noticed that the quarterbacks are very top heavy. Like you have your Mahomes.
Definitely.
Yeah, like Mahomes, Murray, Wilson, Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson, Burrow, Herbert, Tua. Lamar Jackson is quickly dropping out of this tier at the top.
Yeah.
Dak,
Lamar Jackson hurts this year. He hurts.
Yeah, it's rough. And then with like Dak at QB 10, after that you have, like for me with my current rankings, it's Jared Goff QB 11, Aaron Rodgers QB 12, Matthew Stafford 13, Ryan Tannehill 14, Wentz 15, Baker 16. It's like, do you really want those guys at 11 to 16?
No, they're so inconsistent. They're so inconsistent is the problem.
And then even if they're not inconsistent, like Aaron Rodgers this year, he has another year, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Like
he has maybe
2
one
or 3.
Two. Yeah, it's so interesting that you brought that up, like the draft strategy in super flex leagues with early quarterbacks and people passing on them. I feel like it's a different mindset because like in redraft, I do tend to lean towards the single quarterback leagues in redraft. I do tend to lean towards the more late round quarterback strategy. But in Dynasty, I think it's important to get an early quarterback in super flex leagues because there's always guys every year like the Travis Fulghams of the world that come out of nowhere and you can throw him in your flex spot and he'll get you like 10 points a game. And people always sleep on those kind of guys coming in out of the startup draft. They think that if you don't have a fully loaded team of players every single position that you're screwed. And that's just not true.
Yeah, and I was wanting to actually bring up, I'm currently doing a Superflex, I believe it's PPR mock draft, Dynasty mock draft right now. And I'm trying to focus on actually using my own rankings for this. And one thing that makes it a little weird is that it's using 2 QB like redraft values. So some of the players are going to fall a little bit further than you would think. Mm-hmm. But with it, we had a surprise 1.01 with Alvin Kamara, which I still am very much Patrick Mahomes 1.01, Kyler Murray 1.02, CMC 1.03. And then the 1.04 is where, to my eyes, it gets really interesting with Kamara, Russell Wilson, even Dalvin Cook, how he's been doing recently, Joe Burrow, and Deshaun Watson. So who's your 1.04 out of those players I just mentioned?
104 right now. I mean, I still think that Mahomes is probably the 101. Kyler's probably the 102 or 103. 104, I think I'd probably go Alvin Kamara. I think if I were to give a ranking, I'd probably, for Superflex in the top 4, I'd probably go Mahomes, Kyler, McCaffrey, Kamara right now. I feel like he's the safest bet long-term as far as talent and production level.
Yeah, I like that call. And with me mentioning, this QB tier, I have the 1.05, and I ended up getting Russell Wilson there, which that's an interesting pick for me because Russell Wilson's hard for me to pinpoint exactly because, he is a little bit older, but he's also just been so efficient his whole entire career. Coming back around at 2.08, I got Tua Tagovailoa, and then the drop-off happens. At 2.12, it was Rodgers, 3.01 Tannehill. Yeah, and then it was Wentz, and then Goff at 3.08. And so it's like other QBs that are currently hanging around is like you have your Matthew Stafford, Daniel Jones. I'm looking like Drew Lock potentially, even though he hasn't done much.
It's a waste for me. It really is.
Yeah.
And to highlight it, like the positional strategy, I think it's great that you got 2 quarterbacks early, and then waiting round 3, you still get a young stud wide receiver in A.J. Brown to build your team around. So you get your 2 quarterbacks to lock in for at least the next 4 years probably with Russell Wilson, and then you get a good wide receiver to complement the team.
Yeah, and that's something that I'll be talking about a lot more in the summer as well, is how to sort of construct your team, because I've had a not necessarily a change in philosophy, but more focusing on like usually quarterback and like one high end running back, which actually is similar to how John Hogue, who's at Superflex Dude on Twitter, does his. I think if you can get someone like an AJ Brown in the third, why the heck not? Because he's that guy
Yeah,
who's
for
going to be
sure.
a top 5 wide receiver talent for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree.
So now that we talked about a little bit about trading and how we like to roster our teams, we're going to just go straight into some trades. We have a lot of trades right here.
Let's do it.
So this is going to be a combo of 2 QB, super flags, 1 QB type of trades. A lot of these don't have very many quarterbacks. We are going to talk about some trades that we both have done. But we're going to start with our first trade, which is sending – this is a 10-team, 1 QB PPR league. This person sent away David Montgomery and Scotty Miller, and received Darren Waller. What do you think, Luke?
Well, for me, I am kind of one-sided to this trade because before we went on air, actually, I talked about how much I like Darren Waller in Dynasty leagues. I feel like a lot of people were cold on him in this offseason, thinking that the level of production and target share would just drop after the offseason, which it has a little bit, but he's still been a really reliable fantasy tight end. And he's not that old. I think he's like 28. So he's still got some good years of production left in him. And I'm not too sold on David Montgomery. I think he's a bit of a bust. He'll get you like 10 points a game. He has a lot of production. And then Scotty Miller, I think he'll be pretty forgettable for Tampa Bay going forward.
Yeah, I do agree with you that I'm on the Darren Waller side. I'm actually a David Montgomery a fan going into the season, but pretty much, yeah, it's going to be. And I was actually a cold on Darren Waller, so I would have made the opposite trade going into the season. But the reason that you have to switch your thought process is we have Darren Waller, who's currently the tight end 3 with 13.9 points per game right now in PPR, and then Montgomery, he's below an RB2 in points per game, but I think he's just going to be that guy that year in, year out is going to be like an RB2 with like he just gets the workload to do that. And then I think he has at least one more year left. But if I need a tight end, I'm doing this trade all day.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you have some decent running back depth and you want to go get Darren Waller, I think this is a great trade for the Darren Waller side. I definitely agree that David Montgomery might just have like a flex type player career for a while. I do think he'll be replaced in Chicago soon, though. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, Chicago's interesting.
Their offense is tough.
I know. It's like they need a new quarterback, but they traded for one that's expensive, and it's a
total mess because Trubisky's contract isn't cheap either. I mean, it's cheap for a rookie deal, but I mean, he was still a number 2 pick, which is not cheap, especially in his last year.
I think, Trubisky will be – I believe he didn't get re-signed to anything, so he'll be a free agent this offseason, if not.
He will be.
Yeah, he's someone that I'm interested in Superflex leagues potentially trying to get him, but at the same time, it's sort of how much are you paying for these players, because it's more of a thought of which team is going to say we can get this quarterback fixed, because there's going to be at least one that looks at Trubisky and thinks we can work with that.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree. I don't think I'm really targeting him this offseason because – I mean, to me, it kind of feels like the story of Blake Bortles. And look what happened with Blake Bortles. I mean, he went out and kind of blew it with the Jags after having some successful seasons, kind of like what Mitch Trubisky did in that run with the Bears in the playoffs when they got the double doink. And then now he's a backup quarterback for the Rams, I'm pretty sure. And he's probably never going to start for a team again unless an injury happens.
Yeah, that is a good point. What if you could get Trubisky for like a mid-2021 third?
I mean, if you're kind of desperate for a third or fourth quarterback in Superflex leagues and you have an excess of draft picks, a 2022 third is definitely a reasonable price.
Yeah, that'd be a decent counter right there. So we're going to go to this next trade. It's a 1 QB league again, 10-team PPR. Ooh. And this trade I actually think is super interesting. And I'm just going to, for my own thought process, think the team that sent these players is more of a rebuild team, and the team that received, or let me just tell the trade, sent away Cooper Kupp, 2021 mid-first, and Jonnu Smith, received George Kittle. So what I'm saying is this team that received George Kittle, I'm assuming is going to be more of a retooling, rebuilding team. So
I see this
getting Kittle right now with him being out for the year.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, when he's out for the year. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah,
he's out.
You're good.
Well, never mind. But yeah, normally I would say it's a contending team trade. But yeah, I agree. It's probably for a team going for next season.
But then again, that 2021 mid-first is an interesting addition to that trade. with Cooper Kupp and Jonnu Smith. I'm trying to think which side would I prefer as a retooling, rebuilding team, and I guess it depends on how many holes I think I have. I probably, if I was a contending team, which this may have happened before George Kittle was injured, I would keep Kupp 2021 mid-first and Jonnu if I'm a contending or rebuilding team if this is after the injury.
Yeah, I honestly think this is a fair price before the injury. If Kittle was healthy, I feel like this trade even might be a win for the Jonnu side. I think Kupp's a solid wide receiver going forward. He has a big contract in LA. Jonnu Smith looks to be a legit tight end, and then first-round draft pick.
Yeah, and that mid-first in a 1 QB is not quite as valuable as, say, in a super flex because it just gets so deep with the quarterbacks. But, yeah, I'm with you in that. With how Jonnu's shown up this season, even midway through the season, like through 6 weeks, I definitely can see an argument for not going the Kittle side on this one. So, that was a switch in my mindset because at first I was like, that's pretty even. But the more I think about it, if this happened today, the only reason I would do Kittle is if my team was stacked everywhere else except for my tight end position, and I felt like it could really launch me to contending for the next year. But
a question I'll ask about that trade is, would you today? He's injured, he's out for the year. Would you still do the trade if you sense Kupp and Jonnu for Kittle? So, would you like the Kupp and Jonnu side more than Kittle still without the first?
I do Kittle in that one if I'm a retooling team. I would.
I don't know. I feel like Kupp and Jonnu is still a fair offer for Kittle if he's injured, but I don't know.
I think it's fair if that team with the George Kittle is a contending team. Like Cooper Kupp right now is the wide receiver 24 total with total points, and I'm looking it up real quick. Wide receiver 27 in points per game, which obviously this is not like a one season thing.
That's not
We're looking
bad.
at Cooper Kupp as that long-term guy for Jared Goff. And I mean, for myself, with how deep the wide receivers are, Cooper Kupp's my wide receiver 26 in Dynasty. So that'd be trading away the wide receiver 26 and the tight end 6 for the tight end 2. So you're definitely right in that it's an interesting trade for both sides, especially if Jonnu can continue to sort of blossom as a solid tight end option.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. This next trade is really catching my eye.
I know, and I definitely know which side I want. I would have been the complete opposite going into the season, but this is a 12-team PPR.
Tough.
Yeah, it's 2 QB, and it's sending away Jonathan Taylor, receiving DeAndre Swift in a 2021 second. I know Swags, who is Swagzilla on Twitter, is yelling at me if he listens to this, being like, you better not pick the wrong side here because he's a huge Swift fan. What do you think, Luke?
This is really tough because if this happened 3 months ago, I would smash the Jonathan Taylor side here. But he really hasn't shown much. And I think that Swift's opportunity is only going to increase. And this might be an unpopular opinion. It was kind of 50-50 from analysts is what I saw from the offseason. But coming out, I actually had Swift ranked slightly higher than Jonathan Taylor from my running back rankings as a pure prospect. But when he landed in Detroit, definitely went down a peg or two for me. But Jonathan Taylor hasn't been producing very well. And then Swift and a second, it's pretty enticing. I don't know. The side for Jonathan Taylor still, I've been seeing on Twitter a lot, is that he might be having like a Melvin Gordon type rookie year, and then next year he'll bounce back and, light the league on fire. But I think right now, I think it's hard to turn down that Swift in the 2021 second.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you in that. If I'm a contending team, I would go ahead and take Swift in the second and go ahead and move Swift, or the second, for something else because –
yeah, that's a good idea.
Swift has had a couple of rough games recently. This most recent game, he had a decent game in PPR, which is typically how I talk about it. But 12.7 points in week 9. While we saw Taylor, he had a quick explosion, then fell off. But one thing that's really interesting to me actually is that Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift so far on the season have the same exact points per game, and it just doesn't feel that way.
But
they have the same exact. Yeah,
it feels like Swift's doing a lot better.
It does, and I think that's partly just because of the expectations of Taylor and Swift going in.
Yeah.
But I have to lean with the Swift side just because, as you mentioned, the opportunity, I expect it to increase. And I've at least tried recently to try not to go into theoreticals with players and not try to make excuses for them with like, Jonathan Taylor's season, he's going to get better next year. Instead, think, and I think it's fine if you want to think about it that way, but be careful because you can think yourself into anybody,
Definitely.
like even someone like, who's a good example? Like, Zeke, he struggled for 3 weeks. Do you try to trade for him as a retooling team? For me, no, I'm pretty much staying away from him. There's other people I want
Really,
because
I'm in a dynasty on Zeke right now because I feel like here's the case for Zeke is Dak Prescott's out. You have garbage cans at quarterback. They're loading up the box. Zeke can't run. They know that if they take away the run, they have to make him pass. So they're loading the box up. They're confident that they're going to make him one-dimensional, and then they just let the quarterback do the terrible passing, and then they win.
I mean, I can see the narrative of that, but I still just get nervous in trying to, like, most likely you're going to have to pay up for Zeke still because he's considered a top 10 dynasty running back, maybe top 4 by people who have him on their team. So it does obviously depend on price. It just makes me nervous to try to trade for a player that looks like they're on a downhill slope. And yeah, Dak could be back and they could be right back to having the Zeke of the last couple of weeks, week 1 through about 5. But I would probably need to look.
That's what I'm saying with the Zeke is, I'm not trying to cut you off, sorry, but he was producing just fine this season until Dak got injured. And then all of a sudden Dak gets injured, bad quarterback comes in, boxes are loaded, and then all of a sudden he sucks. I mean, I just don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, it's the same season. There wasn't an injury. So, I mean, I feel like that explains his down performance.
Yeah, I can definitely see that argument. I was talking with someone about what were they saying? Some trade. It was like I think it was Antonio Gibson in like a 2021 first for Zeke, and I was just like, I'd rather hold on to Gibson in the first. I'm not gonna go for Zeke in that one.
Yeah, that's tough. I feel like I would lean the Gibson in the first side, especially if it's early or mid.
And I know I'm pulling at your heartstrings because you're a Gibson truther.
I am a Gibson guy, yeah. But I mean, if I knew that Zeke was going to be good, still, I think I would take Zeke. But
yeah, I'm with you. So this next one to me, at first I had a different thought, but it switched on me. So it's a 12-team half PPR, assuming 1 QB as well. Sent away a 2021 first that's going to be late. Received Mark Andrews. And this person also wrote that they lost Kittle and they have Hunter Henry and Hurst. So
I think this is such a bad trade for the Andrews owner or manager. Sorry. I think that's such a bad trade.
I agree. I'm definitely not going to be trying to acquire Andrews currently, especially with the struggles that we have seen from just him and the whole offense. I'm not looking to trade a first away for him.
Did you see that today that Lamar was claiming that the other teams know their plays?
I saw
that. Did you see
that? Like, why are you saying that, dude?
Yeah, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. But I actually think this is a terrible trade because I think a 2021 contender first for Mark Andrews is a terrible deal for the person who took the 2021 first in general. But I think it's bad.
Really? I'm the opposite.
No, I would definitely trade. Like if I needed a tight end, a 2021 first, a buy low, and Mark Andrews right now, I'm in. Even though the Ravens offense is underperforming, I just believe in the talent of the player. Just long term, I do. But I think this is a terrible trade for their team because Kittle will be back next season, and Hayden Hurst and Hunter Henry.
That is Hunter Henry.
Hunter Henry and Hurst, especially Hurst. I think Hurst is a fine starting tight end right now. So I think next year you're going to have Kittle, Andrews, Hurst, and Hunter Henry. You're definitely trading either Andrews or Kittle next year anyway. So I don't think there's really a point in going out and getting Mark Andrews.
So would you rather have a late 2020 first or Mark Andrews?
Just in general, I would rather have Mark Andrews. But in this situation, I think I'd rather have the first. I would have not have made this deal if I was that team.
That's exactly where I was leaning with it. So we do agree, actually.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, because I just think Hunter Henry and Hurst is good enough, especially with the Mark Andrews struggles. And like you mentioned, they already have Kittle that is currently injured. And with that 2021 first, depending on who has someone like a Julio Jones or someone like that, you could potentially do a trade for them. Maybe like a trade for Fulgham and another high-end piece that can help you out for this year. If you actually want to move it, I've sort of gone away from moving 2021 first just to contend. I don't think that you have to in all circumstances, because especially if this was a super flex, which I don't think it is, but that late 2021 first is could potentially be someone like a Herbert or, even like a Denzel Mims, like players like that have value.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
So let's go into this next one, which I found really interesting. 12-team, 1 QB standard league rebuilding team sent away Swift late first. Remember, this is 1 QB.
Yeah,
and then
I
received Saquon.
As a rebuilding team, I have no idea why you're trading away a draft pick and DeAndre Swift. Swift's value is only going to go up, and you need draft picks if you're rebuilding. I understand wanting to get Saquon, especially on an injury dip for next season, but I just don't think it's a good strategy to send your draft picks, especially with a young player.
I'd be curious on the other draft picks this team has, because let's say, because it's a late 2021 first, so if they're rebuilding, they should have hopefully their own 2021 first. It's more of an early pick as well. So it's definitely one of those things that if you have multiple, you may have more wiggle room.
You also could view this as trading away Swift, who will be in your lineup helping you win now, for Saquon, who will be on your IR, helps you tank without really tanking. So it further advances your 2021 draft pick to the 101 direction, which is a good angle. But
yeah, I think
I'm still not a fan. Yeah, in general, I would rather have Swift in the 2021 first.
Gotcha. I think this to me is more team dependent in the sense of how many firsts they have. If you for some reason have like a really weak team that needs multiple pieces, it's going to be like a year to 2 years, or more like 2022. Hopefully not 2023, but 2022 until you're competing. Keep Swift in the 2021 first. In my eyes, get those players that can help with your depth now. But if you have a team that's relatively solid and you have a couple of firsts already, I would be comfortable making this trade for Saquon because I do believe in his talent. But I also do see, Swift's on the rise, and I can definitely see people preferring the Swift side as well. So this is a sort of a win-win trade in a way, depending on which side you like.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You can look at it through several different angles, as we just did. So it's definitely a win for either team, depending on how your team's looking.
Yeah, and this next one's going to rub some people the wrong way, potentially. 12-team, 1 QB standard league again. Rebuilding team again. This is actually the same as the team above. Sent DJ Moore, received Michael Pittman and Jalen Reagor. I really don't know how to feel on this one. It just feels tough. Dirty all around.
Tough. I like the idea as a rebuilding team to go out and get 2 young guys for 1. DJ Moore has had a bit of a down year, so I wouldn't really be looking to sell him right now. But I haven't really seen a lot from Michael Pittman. But Jalen Reagor, in the few games that he was healthy, I think he looked pretty good. So I think it's fine for both sides, I guess. I just don't really understand why they were selling DJ Moore right now because his value is down.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've had a couple of discussions about with like value is talking about the buy high versus sell low, or I'm getting it confused. Sell high, buy low, or even sell high, buy low. I am not being able to speak right now. This is
you're all good.
But anyways, do you want to sell these players when they're a little bit lower, like Juju or DJ Moore, because you don't see them coming back up? I think that for me, DJ Moore should go up. Honestly,
he should definitely go up. Yeah,
I lean more towards holding DJ Moore, and honestly, the team receiving DJ Moore, I guess you're trying to get a player that could potentially score more points, but in standard leagues, I'd rather have Reagor right now as a contending team than DJ Moore.
I didn't even see that. Playing. Yeah, I didn't even see standard. I would definitely rather have Reagor as far as a team that if you're looking for some boom and a flex, I would rather have Reagor.
Yeah, that's why it's more interesting trade-wise. It's more, I guess, a trade focused on name value. But I agree with your analysis that it's an even trade. It's not to one side or the other. So this next one may again. I was looking for some trades that would be interesting discussions, and this one is a 12-team Superflex PPR sending away Swift and Preston Williams, receiving CD Lamb.
That's interesting.
I agree.
I mean, I would say good to buy low on CD Lamb right now, but I don't think they bought low. DeAndre Swift, as we discussed recently, is the price tag definitely is interesting right now. I like Swift quite a bit, but I think I I think I lean CeeDee Lamb over Swift in general for a one-of-one swap. And Preston Williams doesn't really move the arrow too much for me. I mean, he could be a steady wide receiver 2 on the Dolphins with Tua for the coming years, but I don't love him. I think he'll most of the time be on your bench, maybe flex every once in a while. So I think I lean CeeDee Lamb side, especially in a full point PPR.
Gotcha. I'm going to do the lame answer of, let's just say you need a running back, trade for Swift, need a receiver, trade for CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah,
I
that's
think it's a
definitely.
relatively even trade all around.
I
So,
agree. It's definitely even.
yeah, and I'd even say ceilings of Lamb versus Swift is pretty even as well. I know a lot of people, want to say Lamb has a super high ceiling, but so does Swift, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Swift has a 3-down running back skill set. He can definitely is. Let's say I forgot that I was going to mention this earlier. I think there's a decent chance that Matt Patricia gets fired this offseason in Detroit, and he's a running back by committee man. So if a coach who comes in who likes to have a bell cow running back sees DeAndre Swift, who's a premier running back prospect and with a 3-down skill set, he could turn into a really, really good fantasy asset in the future.
Yep. So next one, 12-team Superflex. This person sent away Mixon, Hurst, and Tannehill and received Mahomes.
It's Mahomes for me. Mixon's going to be great for years, probably. I mean, he's going to be probably a running back 1, running back 2. But Hurst could be a flash in the pan, especially with Matt Ryan getting a little older. And I think Ryan Tannehill's time in Tennessee won't be elite for too long. I mean, I feel like he'll be pretty good for fantasy, but I don't think Ryan Tannehill will ever be your franchise quarterback 1 in a super flex league. But Patrick Mahomes, he's like 24 years old, 25 years old. You'll put him in your quarterback 1 spot in your super flex team, and he'll sit there for the next like 8 years and be a quarterback 1.
Yeah, I do also side with the Mahomes side, and I will say Ryan Tannehill right now is the current quarterback 10 in total points and in point per game, which I always like to look at point per game. He's actually QB 10 as well.
Yeah,
so
I
he's having an interesting season, but I'm not a huge Mixon fan. He hasn't really shown me.
No.
He's had a couple of good endings to the season. He may do that again this year, but how long do you have to do that? And so you're like, you know what? I want the stud in Mahomes. I want to get the guy who's going to score 26 fantasy points in a 4-point per touchdown league, going up into 35 or so in a 6-point, and get that stud.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier, how much of an advantage an elite quarterback in a super flex team league is. So I definitely agree. And I like Joe Mixon. I think he's a great NFL running back, but he's been too inconsistent for fantasy to really, really invest in him.
Yeah, and in my eyes with Tannehill, he's like the very, very end of that tier of QBs I'm okay to have on my team, but it's a shaky one though, because he can go either way depending on how everything runs. Luckily, he has AJ Brown. That's the one shining spot.
He has AJ Brown, and I think he doesn't get game scripted out too easily for the Titans, but he definitely can. Is a problem, which is definitely a problem for any fantasy quarterback that you have. But the other problem with Tannehill is he's not young. Ryan Tannehill doesn't feel very old. It doesn't feel like he's been around for too long, but I think he's 31 years old, which is definitely not young for a quarterback. So I think he'll probably only be a starter for the next maybe 4 years. So who knows?
Yeah, and this next trade is one that this person first wrote in this and said roast me, and I was like, honestly, I look at this trade, I don't hate either side. It's a 12-team PPR tight end premium of 1.5 points per reception, and this person sent away Jonathan Taylor, received Noah Fant, Damian Harris, a mid 2021 second, and a mid 2021 first. I'll go into my thoughts on it first. So you look at it, at the beginning of the season, you're like, what are you doing? This is like a ridiculously low ball offer, but I'm still a huge Noah Fant fan. And I think if you need a tight end, and then you also have, that mid 2021 first or that mid 2021 second with Damian Harris, who could potentially be the guy to have on the Patriots. I'm not quite sure where I'm at with Damian Harris yet. I think he has potential, but I think this is a relatively even trade if you need multiple pieces as a more retooling team.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of tough. I would kind of prefer to be able to look at both these teams' rosters before I really fully assess this deal. Noah Fant in a tight end premium league is obviously a very good dynasty asset. Damian Harris, I like him in redraft a good bit, But in Dynasty, it's New England. Running backs are so replaceable there. You're always competing with the committee. We haven't seen the relationship between Damian Harris and Sony Michel when they're both healthy yet. Maybe a mid second you can get like if you hit the lottery and get like a guy like Chase Claypool. I mean, that's like the ceiling. The floor is a guy who's a total bust like JJ, I think a Whiteside. And then a mid 2021 first. I mean, obviously you can hit the lottery, you can get a guy who's pretty eh. So with all that being said, I think it's fair, but I still lean Jonathan Taylor. Just because I think that the upside is there for elite running back production, and that's not easy to come by. So just for that reason alone, I will lean Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, and I'd also say if this is more of a shallow league or like a only start 7 or 8, I'm going to definitely go Jonathan Taylor. If it's more of a start 10, start 11, which start 11 leagues, if anybody's never been in one, are wild. Because you're starting people eventually and you're like, oh, man, I really need more depth on my team. It's rough, but
those teams with like start 11, even start like 12, I've been in a couple like that. The waiver wire is barren. It is insane. You have to really focus on guys that you like and take shots. It's fun.
Yeah, I'm with you. So this next one, 12-team, Superflex, PPR, tight end premium, sent away Clyde Edwards-Helaire in a late 2021 second, received Derrick Henry. This guy said that his team is more of a contending team. I like Henry's side as a contender.
As a contender, I like the Henry side, but just for the trade calculator's sake in general, I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Dynasty more. But if you're a contender, I definitely like the Henry side.
Yeah, I agree. I think Henry, I think, Clyde Edwards-Helaire still has a decent future. I actually still like him over Jonathan Taylor right now for their careers. Obviously, they're so close to me in a way that it's not like a huge difference. But with Derrick Henry, the amount of help that he can give you for a team in the playoffs, especially that's when he goes off. Like it's the playoffs when he blows up.
He ramps up. Yeah.
Like I have a joke in my work league that every time a team ends up getting to the finals, they have Derrick Henry. Luckily, I beat that team last year, but it was every year. It was for 2 years in a row they had Derrick Henry, and I was like, guys, we're just going to need to pick Derrick Henry 1.01 because that's obviously the factor right there.
Yeah, seriously. But I think you were talking about in Dynasty in general. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a tier above Jonathan Taylor now. I think that Le'Veon Bell is a 1-year rental for the Chiefs. And I think the touchdowns will come. They're really low for him right now. He scored last week, I'm pretty sure. But the touchdowns will come with time. I think next year he'll probably get at least 6 touchdowns. And I think we'll see Clyde Edwards-Helaire evolve into a more elite fantasy asset next year.
Especially PPR leagues, he has that potential to catch a lot of passes, which that's something that, I hope that comes to play because he's someone that I have in the progressive or the productive. I think it said progressive earlier, but productive struggle team that I have him and Cam Akers and Leonard Fournette. It's a weird hodgepodge of running backs right now, but yeah, I think that he has very high potential. I think Jonathan Taylor does as well. I'm not on the like players are washes right away. Like Cam Akers to me isn't a bust. J.K. Dobbins isn't a bust yet, but I will say it's very disappointing that none of the running backs have broken free yet, and we're in freaking like week 10 now. It's crazy.
None of them are really broken free. I think that I honestly prefer J.K. Dobbins over Jonathan Taylor in Dynasty right now. Do you agree with that or no?
I sometimes in my head I have thoughts, and then I like to compare it to my rankings, and I'm actually, looking at them now. J.K. Dobbins and I think Swift both have a pretty solid argument for being over Jonathan Taylor. I will say the Ravens in general are starting to make me pretty dang nervous because of the inefficiencies they've been dealing with. But that's not gonna make me run away from J.K. Dobbins.
Well, as a Steelers fan, I just watched J.K. Dobbins run all over them a couple weeks ago, and he looked really, really good. I love J.K. Dobbins as a prospect. I had Swift and Jonathan Taylor over him coming out, but he was my favorite prospect of that group. I think J.K. Dobbins is a really, really good NFL running back. And once Mark Ingram hits the door after this offseason, most likely, and it's just him and Gus, I think he will really start to see some fantasy production.
Yeah, and I think the rookie running backs just take a little bit of time because the coaches have a little bit more trust in like Gus Edwards. Like last week, Gus Edwards fumbled and he still stayed in. And that's something that we just need to understand as people, fantasy. We're like, oh, talent this, talent that. Well, sometimes there's that trucks factor. That's why Adrian Peterson's still getting carries and catches.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson honestly has been sneaky good for redraft too, which is really weird. But yeah.
So we're going to go into a trade that you made. This is a 12-team Superflex, half
It's a
PPR, tight
doozy.
end, premium, start 10 contending team, 4 point per touchdown. Luke sent Mahomes, Phillip Rivers, Kenny Golladay, and Myles Gaskin, and received Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Tyler Lockett, Debo, Travis Fulgham, and Antonio Gibson. As we mentioned at the start of the show, Luke is an Antonio Gibson fan. I will say off the bat, I like the idea of getting, those two pretty solid, like upper tier quarterbacks of Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford. You do lose Mahomes, of course. We mentioned that hurts, but you've got rid of Phillip Rivers, which he hasn't been fantastic.
No. Well, I was also going to offer, I am a contending team in this league. So getting a boost at it's a start 10 league. So there's 3 flexes, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a quarterback, and a super flex. So you need a ton of depth if you want to be a really high up contender, especially in this league. There's 2 other crazy teams along with mine who are like loaded. So getting the boost of an options for flexes of Tyler Lockett, Debo, Fulgham, and Antonio Gibson is huge. And I also have Joe Burrow. So having the quarterback rotation of Burrow, Rodgers, and Stafford, 2 of those 3 will probably have good matchups every week. So it'll be nice to kind of have a carousel of quarterbacks. And I didn't really need Kenny Golladay. I love Kenny Golladay, but he's been having a little bit of a down year. And I don't really need him because I still have a ton of other good wide receiver options. And yeah, that's why I like the trade.
And I mean, you got at least 2 in that trade too. Tyler Lockett and Travis Fulgham, which I think Travis Fulgham is solid for at least the rest of this year and potentially, for the next year as well.
Yeah, I think he's the real deal. I think he's this year guy who came out of nowhere story who will establish himself to have a good career. He's looked really good, just like watching him play.
Yeah, he's someone that I was, saying, go start trading for him now before, people get that idea. And it's so weird to me because, you see these players and your first thought is, that's not going to be a real thing. And then you have to, change your thought after another week and be like, you know what? Make the trades now before people are like, oh, you can only get him for a first.
Yeah,
that's all
exactly.
That's all I want.
That's exactly what I was talking about earlier when I said in Superflex leagues, I think it's great to get the quarterbacks early in drafts, startup drafts, because you'll fill out your roster, and at the end of the draft, you'll be like, oh, my depth's a little thin. But every year on the waiver wire, there's a guy like Travis Fulgham or Mark Andrews from last year or Darren Waller. There's always these guys who are sneaky that come out of nowhere, and you can get them on your team, and they'll be good for a while. And Myles Gaskin.
Yeah, Myles Gaskin. Even, some guys that could have helped you are like J.D. McKissick was on a couple waiver wires. I'd even say I'm trying to look at one of my teams right now to see some guys that I've been adding recently. Keelan Cole was someone. Hasty, Gus Edwards could potentially have been on a waiver wire. Also, like Logan Thomas was someone that I liked. Obviously, it's fallen off recently. I'd even add in, Lutton for a quarterback potentially, which we mentioned how it's hard to find a quarterback, but he played well. I don't think he's the future, but if you need a quarterback to play, he's someone that I'd want on my team. Even someone like Marvin Hall, someone like that. You can get depth.
Yeah, and like Tim Patrick from Denver, he's been sneaky good. Buying low on guys like Christian Kirk, who's been having a sneaky breakout year. There's a ton of options.
Yeah, so I want to get I made 2 trades recently. I want to get on the first one. I want your quick reaction. Which side you like? The second one we'll discuss a little bit more because the second one I think is a more interesting discussion. So first trade, 12-team Superflex PPR, small tight end premium. It's only 1.25. And this is a team that I am more of a retooling team doing a productive struggle.
Okay.
I sent Big Ben, Giovanni Bernard, and N'Keal Harry. Received Drew Lock, Andy Isabella, and Gerald Everett. All right, quick, which side do you like?
If you're rebuilding, I definitely like your side because Drew Lock's just so much younger than Ben. Giovanni Bernard's a backup, and N'Keal Harry, sadly, I think will be a bust. I loved him coming out, but he's turned into a bust. So, I mean, and Andy Isabella could end up developing into something special, and Gerald Everett he hasn't really done much this year, but he always has the potential to creep in there. So I definitely like your side, I think.
Yeah, and I could also see, getting Big Ben over Drew Lock as a contending team being nice. And we never know what's going to happen with Joe Mixon. He's been injured on and off. So yeah, I think that can work for both sides. Now, this next trade, this is a trade that I really like because this team, I also have Patrick Mahomes in it. So, again, 12-team Superflex PPR, small tight end premium, I sent Drew Lock, Hunter Henry, and Marquise Brown and received Dak Prescott and Zach Ertz.
Yeah, I love this trade for you. We talked about this earlier again, like I said, but the Dak and Mahomes stack is pretty unfair. I don't love Zach Ertz going forward, unfortunately, but I still think even maybe if you took Ertz out of this equation and threw in like a second or third, maybe I would still even prefer your side. It's a great trade for your team.
Yeah, Zach Ertz was more as that guy as like a high-end flyer is how I sort of looked at him.
Yeah.
I don't expect to be starting him or anything, but I'm trying to pull up my team real quick just to sort of give the recap of it. So with these trades, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Sam Darnold are my quarterbacks. Running backs is a wasteland. It's something I need to work on, but really the only guy I mentioned is Tony Pollard. And then wide receivers, I have guys like Deontay Johnson, Christian Kirk, Curtis Samuel, Debo. And then tight ends, I got a couple with like Austin Hooper, Drew Sample, Eric Ebron's on that team, Evan Ingram. But the main thing that's going to be helpful is, that Dak Prescott, Mahomes, and then I have like 4 2021 first coming up. So it's going to be a productive struggle. It's going to take me until 2022, but I'm excited.
Productive. Yeah, that's going to be fun. That's going to be fun.
All right, awesome. I had a blast tonight, Luke. We had a ton of good discussions and some really good disagreements on it, too. I always love a good disagreement. So, first of all, do you have any projects you're working on or anything that you're doing right now?
I don't really have any projects I'm working on necessarily. I mean, I'm doing all the Dynasty Nerds social media, so if you want to come over to mostly our Twitter page and check out the content I'm putting up there, it's all me mostly. And then I'm starting to write articles for Dynasty Nerds. I have my first one coming out hopefully within the next week or two. And then I'm starting to write for Renegade Blitz on Twitter, which is a Steelers fan page. It's pretty popular. I'm going to be writing weekly fantasy articles about the Steelers players' outlooks if you want to come check those out. So that's what I'm working on.
Sweet. Do you want to give a little sneak peek on your article, or you want to keep it more hush-hush?
Oh, yeah, I definitely can. I'm focusing on an under-the-radar player this season. Last season, it was Devontae Parker, and this article is about giving us going into the journey of finding the next one.
Cool. So everybody get ready for that article to drop. If anybody, Dynasty Nerds articles are always free to read also. You can find my articles on Dynasty Nerds as well. So thank you again for coming on, Luke. Everyone go and follow Luke on Twitter at Luke Sawhook. Sawhook. Yeah, there we go. LUKESAWHOOK.
There you go.
Also make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the Snake of the Draft podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Let's be snakes this season.